The rand is slightly firmer as markets wait local inflation figures and a central bank interest rate decision in the days ahead. Viv Govender is the portfolio manager at Rand Swiss, and he joins us now for the latest market moves. Viv, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Let's start with an overview of how markets are faring so far at midday trade.
Pretty much unchanged. I mean, nothing is moving more than 1%. Any sectors, no sectors up. Are down more than 1%. We saw slightly down, whereas industrials and financials are slightly up. The rand is still around the 19, just below the 19 rands to the dollar level. We've seen gold prices, tick a little higher, but the one thing that I think is the longer-term worry is the oil price, which is at $95 plus a barrel for Brent crude oil at the moment.
We'll come back to the oil price, but let's take a look at events here at home. All eyes will be on the MPC in terms of that interest rate announcement. What are you looking forward to, or if you look into the crystal ball, which way are they going to go?
Look, I mean, it's probably going to be unchanged. The prime lending rate at the moment is about just under 12% at 11.75. But if you look at, like I mentioned, the oil price, look at some other factors out there, I think that inflationary pressures are returning after having a brief respite. It's not just local, internationally as well. We saw the U.S. CPI number, tick up all the way from, 3 to 3.7 over the last couple of periods. So it had bottomed out at about 3 and now it's ticking up again, never getting to the 2 level that they were at the target at. And I think that might be a feature that we're seeing elsewhere, a bit of a whiplash effect where, inflation has come down, but we might just see a bit of an uptick again because of things like high energy prices.
The oil price, so these voluntary oil cuts by Russia and Saudi Arabia. When we take a look, for instance, because you speak of how this may have a direct impact on the interest rate decision, when we take a look at the fact that we're part of the BRICS bloc and they're joining the BRICS bloc Saudi Arabia at least, come January 2024. I mean, what is the advantage for these countries that are within BRICS in terms of being, protected or buffered from such moves?
Well, I mean, the problem with these things is that, BRICS is a nice idea, but, practically it has not done very much for members. We've not seen any kind of real, major moves for the BRICS nations, like, for instance, NATO does big things together. The BRICS nations are much more divided. As a group, they're a very big, powerful bloc. I mean, we're talking about almost half the world's population, a third of the world's GDP, a bunch of nuclear countries, China, India, Russia, etc. But that being said, there's just too much conflict between the different parts of the organization. For instance, we talk about, buffering people. Buffering whom? Are you buffering the producers like Russia, Saudi Arabia, Brazil, South Africa to a certain extent in terms of raw materials on one side, or consumers? South Africa in this way is a consumer of oil, but India, China are both oil consumers. Which party or which part of BRICS are you going to try and protect? It doesn't quite make sense from that point of view, just saying that, BRICS is going to work together, because some parts of BRICS benefit from high oil prices and some parts hurt because of it.
Interesting. Back home, consumer confidence in the South African property market improved by 5 percentage points to 78% in the second quarter of this year. Help us make sense of the findings.
Yeah, look, I mean, property has been in a bit of flux recently. We've seen, of course, the work from home phenomena, etc., has done quite a bit in terms of, especially retail property and office buildings, etc., have come under pressure. Retail, residential property, basically, residential property, has been a bit, stronger. People have really kept onto their houses. South Africans are really, are motivated to own homes. It's a big factor in many lives. It speaks to many South Africans. I mean, owning their own home is a very big, motivating factor for them. People have kept onto their homes, and despite really high interest rates like we've seen, that's to a certain extent held on. That being said, people now are starting to get some more, there's a positivity after falling quite a bit in terms of, confidence in pricing. And so we might just see a bit of an uptick come through in home prices. That being said, I mean, I think we really need to see interest rates fall before we see home prices start to rise. Because, if you have $1 million home and interest rates are at 12% versus being at 10%, it's a significant difference how much you can pay.
So Marcus Eustace's legal team is fighting against the JSE fines at the Financial Services Tribunals, with his lawyers contending that there's no evidence he actually knew of the accounting irregularities. What are the chances?
Look, I mean, You can't really know for certain here, just because I have no inside information onto this. But I mean, it would be an act of incredible incompetence not to have been aware of what was happening here if you were basically in the position he was in. So either criminal or like criminally incompetent is the two options that you'd put in front of for this case here. Look, this has been dragging on for a long time, and I think it's actually doing harm to the South African corporate sphere, because in a case like this here, where so much money has been lost, it's so public, and there should be so much motivation on the part of authorities to ensure a quick and just trial. It's been many years since this started off, and we have still not seen justice take its course. And the JSE is trying to do what it can, but it's not the police system, it's not the justice system. It doesn't have a prison. And so I think that's what really needs to be required. You need to have a criminal case that's going to be following up these things.
Is it Germany or something that's looking for him?
Oh yeah, I mean, and that's another part of the problem as well, is that, this is a South African company, he's a South African citizen. South Africans were among the most hurt, if not the most harmed by his or either actions or incompetence, whichever you feel it. And yet it is foreign parties that are the ones that are driving the cases forward, again showing the lack of ability of our justice system at the moment.
The words austerity, what do they mean to you, Viv Govender? This as we are approaching November for that statement by the Finance Department. Apparently, Treasury is going to be making is mulling some very unpopular decisions.
Look, I mean, austerity is going to be painful. It's pain, and that's just how you're going to view it. In a place like the US or Europe, etc., it can be, hurtful. You might have a cutback in here and there. In a place like South Africa, where we have a huge public sector, we have a huge, entitlement, expense in the country. Those are primarily where you're going to be looking at in order to have austerity. I mean, we don't, spend too much on investment stuff in this country. In fact, we probably spend far too low. We can't really cut that much more than it is. It's probably going to have to become from public sector workers, or it's going to be coming from entitlements. And both of those are going to be very difficult to do ahead of an election next year. So I don't have much confidence that the Treasury is going to be able to put through any significant austerity plans, this year at the very least, because, if you're going to be cutting, wages or going back on some of the expectations of workers, or you're going to be cutting back or restricting increases in terms of entitlements. We're talking about child grants, welfare grants, etc. That does not play well with the electorate ahead of an election.
What also does not play well with the electorate ahead of an election is a proposal to increase VAT, for instance, because to find some wiggle room, that too could be an option. Oh yeah, I mean that could be an option. But I think the VAT one would probably get by with a bit less, outrage, because I mean it's one more thing for you to spend maybe 2-3% more on buying your whatever. But if I cut your paycheck by 5%, you'd notice that a lot more. If basically you were living off a social welfare grant and that was cut, you'd notice that a lot more. And in South Africa, I mean, the number of people on the social welfare system is, it's larger than the number of people that are working. And also the same way, the number of public sector employees in this country is way out of balance in terms of the size of our economy and the size of our population, as well as not just the number of workers, but also the pay they get as well. And they're a very motivated, constituency as well. Is South Africa the exception to the rule where that is concerned when we speak of a bloated public service? Yeah, I mean, there are many bloated public services around the world. We are the most bloated virtually of all of them. In terms of normally in the world, what you find is you get the following. If you work in the public sector, you lose out on pay, but you get security. So if you work for the US government, you don't get as much as you would work in Wall Street, for instance, but you get security, so they can't fire you, that kind of stuff. You get benefits. South Africa is kind of like you get both the security of never being fired, but also your pay is higher for a level of qualification than you'd find in the private sector. So you get higher pay and security, which is, unusual anywhere in the world. Viv Govender, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Portfolio Manager at Rand Swiss.